Hey friend, welcome back. This is The Space Between, a 15-part YouTube series where we are exploring the space between the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. Today is part 5 in that journey. Now, last week you may remember that we were hanging out with the Ptolemies in Egypt. This was one of the micro empires that were created after Alexander the Great died and without a successor, and his empire got divvied up among them all. Under Ptolemaic rule in Judea, we saw the beginning of the process of Hellenization, which is the fancy word that means Greekification, that the people started to adopt Greek norms and languages. The Bible got translated into Greek for the first time. We had a huge population of Jews beginning to move into Alexandria in Egypt, and there was this massive system of taxation that began. And they did all of that in the course of about 100 years. Well, buckle up, because there's another part of Alexander the Great's former empire that is about to take over and make a dizzying amount of change in only like 40 years. And these are the Seleucids. This is a group of people in an empire that stretches north into Babylon and down into parts of what would now be Pakistan and India. And under the leadership of Antiochus Iv, he expanded the Seleucid Empire back to almost what it was under Alexander the Great. Even went into mainland Greece, which was kind of unheard of to that time, and probably would have succeeded in conquering mainland Greece if it hadn't been for this young upstart republic that was putting its nose in everyone else's business. You may have heard of them before. The Romans. Ooh, yeah. Remember that name. That'll be important in the future. You know, what with the whole killing Jesus thing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Antiochus III had expanded the Seleucid Empire, but had been stopped by Rome. And if you're a student of history or of modern affairs, you know that war is expensive, especially when you lose the war and your opponent makes you pay for all of the damages that you caused. And that is the position that the Seleucid Empire was in. Yeah, so the book of 2nd Maccabees, which is one of these non-canonical books that was written during this time that's in the Catholic Bible but not the Protestant Bible, tells a story about right after Antiochus III had died, and his son, Seleucus IV, sent his finance minister into Jerusalem to go demand money from the temple to pay off the Roman debt, some huge amount of gold that's unfathomable. And the people prayed against them, and they were stopped by a number of gigantic angels with an angelic horse that literally kicked him in the face and almost killed him. And so he went back with his tail between his legs. It was a fabulous story. It probably didn't literally happen like that. And also, realistically, he probably was after the personal wealth of that ultra-rich tax-collecting family we met last week, because that guy was pro-Ptolemy and anti-Seleucid, and the temple in Jerusalem not only served as a religious center, but also as the national bank in which common folks and rich folks alike could put their money in and have it be invested in loans and mortgages and all those things that, you know, are like what banks do, except instead of being insured by the government, it was insured by the fear of God. Because of stories like this, where you go to raid the temple and some angel is going to kick you in the face. So this is probably what is happening in Daniel chapter 11, where we read that his successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor. But after a very brief reign, he will die, though not from anger or in battle. The author of Daniel here is talking about Antiochus III because he does die shortly thereafter, and not by war or anger, but actually being assassinated by that finance minister who went into Jerusalem to get the money and failed. And after a bit of a succession crisis, Seleucus' brother Antiochus IV became king. This is the guy that I want you to remember. If you remember one Greek-sounding name during this entire series, Antiochus IV, also known as Antiochus Epiphanes, a title he gave himself, which literally translates to God made manifest. Yeah, Antiochus, God on earth. That's the name he gave himself. So I hope that your spidey senses are tingling a little bit about this guy, because he's about to light the spark that will set this whole thing on fire. This tinderbox that's just been so close to igniting, that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks, this battle between the Greeks and the Jews, and the whole cultural milieu of the day, is the tensions are rising, and this is the foolish guy who's going to come in and ham-handedly, quite literally, save that for the end, knock the whole thing into chaos. So, at the beginning of his reign, Antiochus IV is trying to consolidate power because it was, an assassination and then a couple of other successors that he had to kill, and there was this whole intrigue thing. So he's trying to get legitimacy, and he's trying to figure out a way to pay off the war debt to Rome while also secretly expanding his empire without letting Rome know what he's doing. So, enter the high priest's brother, Jason. Now, the high priest Onias III was just doing high priestly things. And Jason, who, if you'll notice, has a Greek name because he gave up his Hebrew name, which was Yeshua, or Jesus, gave up his name to be called Jason because he was one of those Jews who loved Greek culture. So he went to Antiochus and he said, "Hey, Auntie, let me make you a deal. I am going to raise the annual tribute that we normally would give you, because I know you're in debt. And I'm going to do all these other great things for you if you make me the high priest instead of my brother." And Antiochus was like, "I don't care, whatever. This is some backwoods nation, whatever, down there. Sure, have it. I'll take the money." So he takes the money, and Jason gives him a little extra something on the side for the privilege to be able to build a gymnasium in Jerusalem, like a big place where people can work out, typically in the nude, and where young men can be educated in Greek philosophy and science and art and theater. He wanted to have the right to be, for people of Jerusalem to become Greek citizens. He was trying to turn Jerusalem into a Greek polis, or a city-state, like Athens and Sparta and Corinth. He wanted Jerusalem to be one of those. So Jason was given the rights to draw up a list of citizens, which would then give them certain rights that their fellows didn't have, which, if you can imagine, this whole system was full of bribery and nepotism and all those wonderful things that always go into these kinds of scenarios. And there started to grow this very clear caste system between the Hellenized Jews, or the Greekified Jews, and the traditionalist Jews. The Hellenized Jews were the ones who were able to become citizens. They're the ones who sent their kids to Greek school in the gymnasium. They're the ones who were able to get loans at the temple and make money and get positions of power, like being the high priest. The book of Maccabees says that some men sought to reverse their circumcision, which sounds absurd, but an ancient Roman doctor gave us a very graphic account of what that surgery looks like, and I would recommend that none of you look it up. It's awful sounding. And it probably didn't happen all that much, but it happened enough to get written down multiple times that these Jewish men wanted to be seen more as Greek than as Jewish when they were working out and bathing in the nude in the gymnasium. Yeah, no thanks. But that's just one of the examples about how Greek fervor began to spread through all of Jerusalem and into Judea, where Second Maccabees again records that even the priests, this is a great story, even the priests, while in the process of making sacrifices to God, would be like, oh man, it's 3:30. Like the game is almost over. We have to get out of here. And they would leave the sacrifices half done on the altar to get out to the gymnasium so they could catch the end of the game, which how many of us have been in churches where people have been like, the Eagles are playing at 1, so we better get this thing done with. It's so perfect that we still do this. It probably didn't happen all that much, but to the writer of Maccabees, it sure seemed like it was happening a lot. Because Greek culture is super exciting. I love Greek culture. There's the theater and the games and all the ancient TED Talks and the feasts and the food and the wine and, oh man, all those good things. And the people in power in Judea got to that position because, like Jason, they bribed Antiochus and the people of the Seleucid Empire. So there was this incentive for people. If they wanted to get ahead, they had to go Greek. I mean, this is the future, right? Get with the modern times, y'all. The times, they are a-changing, Grandpa. But wait. Oh, wait. Nope. Looks like Jason's not high priest anymore. That was quick. Yeah. Jason sent Menelaus, another Greek name, to go bring the tribute to Antiochus Epiphanes. And when he got there, Menelaus said, hey, here's the tribute. Also, how about I give you a little bit more and you make me the high priest? And so Antiochus is like, man, this system is great. I keep getting money and I don't have to do anything. Sure, you're the high priest now. Go on back and tell Jason that he's done. So Jason had to go run off into hiding or exile for fear of being killed because some other guy outbid him for the position of high priest. This is starting to feel like maybe the high priesthood is not actually what Moses and Aaron imagined that it would be a couple thousand years earlier. But hey, so it goes. Easy come, easy go with money and politics, right? So, just to clarify what's happening here in this very brief span, we've got this Seleucid king who thinks he's a god, who's replacing high priests just left and right, willy-nilly, on whoever can give him the most money, because he needs the money to pay for his vast war debt against Rome. And then we add in a society that is becoming more and more Greek and less Jewish with every passing day. And Antiochus, he's just so singularly focused on reuniting Alexander the Great's empire and conquering Greece and Egypt that he's not paying us any attention to this pressure cooker down in Judea that's about to explode. And then it explodes. Yeah, it gets a little nasty here. Actually, it gets great first. I mean, not great for him. But Antiochus had, at this point, conquered a bunch of Egypt, somehow without Rome knowing, because Rome was really occupied up in Macedonia. So they were kind of doing it piecemeal. They conquered a bunch of cities, everything but Alexandria, really. And so he had gathered his forces, and he was making one final foray into Egypt when he would conquer it, take all of its resources, and then he could stand up to Rome with the united resources of the former Macedonian Empire. And when he got there, crossed into Egypt, instead of being met by the king and an army like you would expect, there was a single old man standing in the desert, staring him down. Gaius Pompilius Laenas, the Roman ambassador to Egypt. And he told Antiochus to withdraw these troops and every garrison that you have put here this moment, or you will officially be at war with the Roman Republic, which, by the way, he owed a whole lot of money to. And he knew he didn't have the military power to beat. So he said, I need to consult with my council. I'll be back in 3 days or whatever. So Gaius took his walking stick, this brittle old man took his walking stick, and he drew a circle in the sand around Antiochus, and he said, "Before you leave this circle, give me a reply that I can take back to the Roman Senate." Such a good line. This is, by the way, where we get the phrase to draw a line in the sand from. Oh, so imagine this Antiochus, who thinks he's a god, being talked to by an old ambassador like that, like he's some kid. So he does the only thing he can do, and he withdraws. And he retreats with his tail between his legs and his pride injured. And he goes to Jerusalem, where he knows he's got friends, and he can, they can eat and they can drink and they can refill. And when he gets to Jerusalem, no, he discovers something different. He discovers that while he was in Egypt, rumors had started to circulate that he was dead. And so remember Jason, that high priest that bought his high priesthood and then got deposed by someone else? He had heard that and had amassed a little mini army of about 1,000 people to retake Jerusalem and kick Menelaus out of the temple and resume his priestly duties and claim independence. So Antiochus shows up to Jerusalem, having found that little mess, having just been thoroughly embarrassed and emasculated down there in Egypt. And he goes berserk on Jerusalem. Ends up in this war killing tens of thousands of men, women, and children indiscriminately, burns down half of the city, erects this massive garrison on the tallest part of the city so that there'd always be a presence, a Seleucid presence in the city, that they could never revolt again. Then he said, you know what? We're just done with all of this stuff. You are no longer allowed to practice your Jewish religion in this city or in this territory. It is outlawed, okay? We're all Greek now, and this temple is now a temple to Zeus, and he sacrificed pigs of all things on the altar. Can you imagine such a thing? Like that's how deeply he was trying to offend the traditional Jewish people, that he took the thing that is unclean, a pig, and he sacrificed it on God's holy altar in the Holy of Holies. And so this act, which the prophet Daniel calls the Abomination of Desolation, which Jesus references as well, by the way, in Matthew, which is next week's reading. Don't get too far ahead. This act is the final stamp on the Hellenization of Judea, of the Greekification of the Jews, that they'd slowly been enticed by the culture and the philosophy and the technology and the science and the art and the theater and all of that stuff. And they just kind of, the worldview had worked its way in, and the language, and the people were feeling really comfortable being Hellenized. And all along, there's these traditionalists who are saying, no, come back to God. Don't abandon God for this idol worship. No. And this kind of ideological civil war has been bubbling for some time. And then Antiochus comes in and says, I'm on this side. I'm on the Hellenistic side, obviously, and you all are done. This is now a Greek city with Greek language and customs and worship. And this ignites a full-on civil war. This will set the urban folks against the rural folks, the elites against the commoners, the rich against the poor. This inspires the one and only successful Jewish revolt in history, sets the expectation for what the Messiah will be like, reignites nationalistic fervor and patriotism, further erodes whatever dignity was left in the priestly office, and creates the various factions that we're going to meet throughout the New Testament. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, all those. And this creates an entirely new form of literature called apocalyptic literature, which we're going to talk all about next week. And you may remember from our study on the book of Revelation a few years ago, which falls into that category. It also gives us Hanukkah, so that's fun, something to look forward to. And the Maccabean revolt which would be the result of this. And the subsequent independent Jewish rule is so important for our understanding of the New Testament that we are going to spend the next 4 weeks on it. So buckle up, friends. We are in for a bumpy ride. I'll see you then.